Well, today we're um, visiting the home of the learned professor Bruce, quote, Swamp Weiss, and
Retired.
yeah, Swamp has told me for years about his mentor, and it's a famous Greenville name, and it seems as though this man passed away some years ago, and it seems a shame that the Bond history wouldn't have a good record of his existence in some way or the other. And since he was a mentor and a good friend to this guy, I think we'd better record something about the late and I would argue great Jim Hoiles.
You betcha.
So how did you get hooked up with Mr. Hoiles?
I met up with Jim Hoiles in 1974 through a friend of mine, who's still a friend of mine, I think, David Johnson, who was a good banjo player and liked that kind of music, sort of fiddle music and bluegrass, basically, more or less. And but was interested in folk music, this and that too. He had a girlfriend who belonged to the Rod and Gun Club, where Jim Hoiles was a caretaker. And they drove out there one day, just a nice spring day, and he sees a guy out there fiddling by the dock, and he said, "Who's that?" And the girl said, "Well, that's Jim Hoiles. He's the caretaker here." Oh, and so
he was fiddling by the dock of the bay.
Just sitting by the dock of the bay there, fiddling away, just for his own amusement and or amazement, maybe. And Dave kind of cataloged that and think, this might be a guy we ought to get to know. And I'd already met David Johnson, and he said, "Yeah, we ought to go see this guy and introduce ourselves."
Dave was a Greenville College student.
He was attending Greenville College at the time, and his major was banjo and girls, I think. And he did pretty well in both departments, I think. So,
usually they're mutually exclusive.
Yeah, banjo. Yeah, it's an acquired taste sometimes.
Yeah.
We won't get into banjo jokes right now, but anyway, he kind of led the way. He met Jim before I did. Jim was a very nice fellow, a little bit retiring. He had a bit of a stammer, and that would make him kind of self-conscious. If he didn't know you, he would stutter a little bit. After he moved away, I got to know Jim more, and kind of took Dave's place, I guess.
Did you go out and visit him at the Rod and Gun cabin, or?
Yeah, at the point when David and I first met him, he was living in what amounted to be kind of a shack. But Jim was all right with that. He was kind of a sort of natural guy. He didn't care about material trappings too much.
He didn't put on airs or anything.
No airs with Jim. He just kind of what you saw is what you got.
But I think most people in Bond County here know the name Hoiles and associate it with a lot of money.
You know? Right, yeah, and that was his father had been a banker in the 30s, I think, and he just heard the name, and so a lot of people would say, "Oh, Jim Hoiles got to have some dough," which he didn't. He didn't. By that point, the family fortunes weren't what they were, so. And he just always liked kind of living kind of bare bones kind of existence.
But he did grow up and live in a fancy house.
He did.
That his father owned, I guess.
His father had a house on College Avenue, and Jim grew up there, right by the college, basically. Jim went to Greenville College. I think he graduated from Greenville College in the 30s. I'm not positive about that, but he did attend. I think he went to the U of I, actually, too, University of Illinois, I believe, what I know. You can look at an old.
He was certainly a native son, which is why that's important to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One thing Jim told me is when he was a child, his family was fairly well-to-do, and they wanted to expose Jim to culture, and they would take him to St. Louis, see the famous violinist Fritz Kreisler was a big name back then.
Never heard.
The long-haired kind of music, and Jim, and he took lessons, I think to please his mother. He told me he heard an old blind fiddler that lived a couple blocks over playing a fiddle one night. And that just struck me. I was like, wow, I like that, and I'd rather do that. So I don't know how his mother felt about it, but that's the path he took then.
In other words, the difference between fiddle and violin.
Right. And people
Yeah.
confuse this all the time. It's the same instrument. It's just the way you play it. So most fiddlers or most violinists have vibrato and certain mannerisms. Fiddle, a lot of short notes a lot of times, and just a different thing. But
There's a
the
difference
instrument's the same.
between, say, Itzhak Perlman and John Hartford.
Yeah. Oh, exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. Both of them incorporate the other styles at times, but usually it's a certain kind of style.
So the fiddle is what got you interested in getting to know Jim better? Or?
Yeah, just that the fiddle was part of the whole milieu of what was going on. I was looking more at I'd played some rock and roll already, and then when the rock bands play up, you could sit around home playing electric guitar, but not as fulfilling as playing with other musicians. So like I say, I found David Johnson playing banjo, and he had a brother Bruce who played mandolin, so I was interested in learning more of that type of guitar. I'm a guitarist primarily, so we got together. We had that little group, and every once in a while Jim would join us, so we had the fiddle in there too. So. But Jim was sort of a gateway to other musicians. One was Johnny Barnhart, who was I don't know if he's a native Sorrento person.
I don't believe so. I think the Barnharts were from South.
They might have been from Missouri, actually, someplace, I think.
I thought it was Kentucky, but I could have him confused with the Busbys up there.
I think he was from Missouri, southern Missouri, I think, originally, maybe.
Huh.
He passed away, I think, down that way. But anyway, regardless, he's kind of Sorrento guy.
Johnny Barnhart and his brother, Raleigh.
Raleigh, yeah. And there was a couple other brothers who, those were the musical Barnharts there, I think. And anyway, we got to know Johnny Barnhart through Jim, who they'd get together. It's kind of birds of a feather. They both like to play, and John was a good fiddler too.
Yeah.
So they'd get together.
Yeah. So basically, when you were just starting to get interested, Swamp Weiss here, the legend, was just starting to get interested in acoustic traditional music, and he was lucky enough to meet Jim Hoiles and be acquainted with John Barnhart, who were some like hill country fiddle playing.
Yeah. Jim had a little more, like I say, a little more polish to him from probably when he was a kid, taking fiddle lessons, which didn't hurt him either. He lost the vibrato and all that stuff.
It didn't sound like an academic style per se.
No, but it was just he was very precise at what he did. Some old-time fiddlers aren't quite so precise as Jim. Johnny, somehow, I don't know all his origins, how he came to play. I think maybe his father had played fiddle too, from what I remember. I didn't meet his father,
so.
But Jim's family, nobody else. Jim was the only musician really of that bunch. But
you.
Well, yeah, right, more or less, yeah.
I just am amazed at where your skill sets, how they just, mushroomed.
Well,
and I guess it was the same with Jim. Maybe you guys had that in common.
I don't know. It's something that nobody ever told me to do. So I guess that's part of that. So thus I came to it.
Yeah. Okay. So Jim was. We don't know anything about his childhood other than he grew up in that nice house and got exposed to. Art.
I'd say he had a privilege. He probably had a privileged childhood. Yeah.
Well, he
comparatively, to some people.
So he gravitated towards the traditional music, and became a scholar. He was basically a scholar about traditional music.
I think he became that way because he just. I've inherited all his fiddle albums, LPs. 33s, and he had a stack of those things. Anytime he would see in a catalog about a fiddle, he'd order the record, and then and good and bad. There's all kinds of records out there, so basically he became a scholar just through exposure to just hearing all these things.
Is that right? I thought he kind of made a study of it or something.
Well, not formally, I don't think. He just kind of informally. He didn't go to school for. There's nothing. Either you study music formally in his day, or not. And he didn't want to do that. So
in your case, you actually were at SIU, and they instituted a traditional folk arts program that you got to study.
Sort of. I was the last. Well, not exactly. I was the last of the last. I was the last Buffalo out of 20,000 people at SIUE, Edwardsville. I declared a folklore major. And they said, we're going to have to talk about this because we really don't have a major. It's still on the books. It's still in the catalog. I said, well, and so it would be a lot of tutoring, blah, blah, et cetera, but, and one-on-one things. So we suggest you get another major. We can't really make you. So I was sort of like the last of Buffalo. I did meet a fellow who got a degree in folklore, whose name is Michael Zanger, who passed away. He was son of an English professor that I had at SIUE. But
so somebody actually did pull it off.
Someone did get a major. He was the last person actually got a degree.
They probably do have degrees like that in some of the Appalachian states. I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't doubt it. You get degrees, and there's a degree in Beatleology. What you're going to do with study of the Beatles, I don't know. But there's a degree out there.
I don't know.
I think you got to go to Liverpool.
Dress up like a Beatle and go to all the band. We just lost Beatle Bob.
Yeah, that's right.
Recently.
Yeah, that's right.
He was a guy that we're really getting off topic here.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we can.
I was not Beatle Bob.
You're not Beatle. Yeah, it's a different guy. But anyway. No, Jim didn't study music formally. It just he never made it a profession either, particularly.
But yet you guys formalized. You made an application and got a formal mentoring in folklore or traditional music from the state of Illinois.
In the early 2000s, I applied for an Illinois Art Council grant back when Illinois had some spare money to spend on these things.
He was a veteran.
Yeah.
Of what, World War II or Korea? Or
World War II. He was born in 1911, and he got in the first round of the draft. And Jim's words said, well, they're taking the old guys first, which they did, the older unmarried guys to begin with. And Jim got in the first round of that and went in 1941. He was there till the end of the war. And he was in the South Pacific a lot. He told me a lot of stories from his time in service. And he came out sergeant, I believe, in the end. He also won a Bronze Star and a couple other medals, I believe.
Anyway, Jim was in the war.
Yeah.
He saw some pretty rough stuff.
Yeah. He had played square dances before he went into the war in the 30s. He told me about it. He said I hated it, and he said people wanted to play for square dances, and the square dances go for like 20 minutes. And they went the same tune over and over and over. He said, it's horrible. So he but he didn't want to be a bad guy. And no, I don't want to,
no, I won't play fiddle for your square dance.
Right. But I thought, he thought about it more, or maybe, if the people had thought about it, you could do a medley of tunes.
You actually got to play with Jim in performances.
Yeah, we dragged Jim out. Myself, in the early days, sometimes with Dave Johnson, and I played with a fellow named Lyle Mayfield, who's pretty much
the Mayfields. By the way, on the Bond County Video Histories, Video Legacies, the Mayfields are featured as one of our first presentations at Bond History.
Okay, great. Yeah, they deserved Lyle Mayfield. was native born here and all. And,
Well, we have a video of Jim playing fiddle with you and Lyle.
okay, yeah,
Which is
right. Jim was just a likable guy. Jim was very likable, unpolitical to the max. Couldn't drag him into a political argument. I think he had his own views, but he just didn't, kind of kept to himself.
That's a good way to be if you're a musician.
Yeah. A lot of musicians aren't, But anyway, we get out. We did drag him out with Lyle a couple times. Just different people.
I thought maybe you played with him a bit more often, but just several times.
Oh, it's here and there. We tried to get him into a couple fiddle contests. Jim by nature was a little bit reclusive too, so
yeah,
we tried to get
well,
him
if you live by yourself in a cabin in the woods, you
yeah,
that's more than a little reclusive.
Yeah, but kind of by nature.
But that's partly why we're doing this, is because even though he was from a prominent family and a gifted artist, he lived off to himself in the woods, and maybe there's quite a few Bond County residents who were just not aware of him.
Yeah, and Jim was sort of retiring individual, so people would see him and think, "Oh, there's that little guy," and he had little round John Lennon glasses before.
That
was
right?
Before.
I don't
You don't remember those? Yeah, and he usually wore overalls, so people thought, well, people can stereotype people unjustly, and they just thought, well, he's a kind of quaint old guy. But
I've seen quite a few millionaires with bib overalls on. Jim became sick, and
well, Jim actually, since he was a World War II veteran, he was getting somewhat elderly, and people were kind of worried he lived on his own. Which elderly people you kind of wonder about whether they can take care of themselves, etc. I think you had an aunt like that, and everybody knows people like that. And since Jim was a vet, he could either go to St. Louis Jefferson Barracks or Quincy, Illinois. And finally got to the point, I thought, well, people talked to him, and maybe I ought to go, Jim. And it's a hard thing to do. But he went to Quincy, Illinois.
Nice town. I don't know about the facility up there.
I only went there one time when he was up there, and Jim was getting Alzheimer's.
Oh.
And it's hard for him to live on his own anyway.
Well, sure.
When he got to the old soldiers' home in Quincy, his medication had been all messed up because he'd forget when he took it and didn't take it. And so when he got there, he actually started feeling better physically, and probably mentally too.
Yeah, some people are actually helped when they go into. I know most elders are scared of the nursing homes and the retirement homes and stuff like that, but I actually saw several of them blossom. And just when they got socialized, and that's not the rule, but it does happen.
Well, it was good. He got acclimated somewhat to the soldiers' home up there. So I'd like to talk, but I got snacks going right. So that made her feel a little better about the situation. Well, I saw him one time. If he'd lived a little closer, I'd try to see him more often. Greenville to Quincy, just an odd trip.
It's a nice town, but it takes. I used to go there to visit friends. There's worse places to end up.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I just wish he'd been a little closer. I probably would have tried to see him more. But, when I saw him, he didn't call me by name, but he said something about Greenville. So he still had something in his memory bank about associating me with Greenville.
Yeah. It's pretty tough to make sense out of too much of any of that.
So, anyway, that's where
it's nice for you to drive up there, though, because that is a long run.
Yeah.
Well, anything else you wanted to say about Mr. Jim Hoiles, the old-time fiddler?
Yeah. Well, I guess about the only other thing I had mentioned earlier that all his albums, there were 5 albums that we recorded together.
Great.
Oh, that's great.
And
we did. I recorded 4 albums with Jim. First one he did with Dave and Melody. It's kind of just a tip of the hat to Dave, because Dave was the guy that kind of discovered Jim, I guess, there. And then
Well, it's a good album, though.
That's-
Really,
yeah,
really,
yeah.
really nice, straight Scotch Irish. It's just a lot of beautiful.
the second album we did was called Mixing It Up with Dave and Melody Johnson and Swamp Weiss, and that was a mixture of. He always liked the Irish and Scotch tune, but it had some more American tunes on it. The third one was the straight Scotch you're talking about, which was pretty much all.
Well, that was the third album.
That was the third album that we did. By the time the fourth album we did that with Johnny Barnhart. And Dave and Melody kind of dropped out. They'd been down in Nashville for a couple years, so it was a little harder to get them up. And we did it with Johnny Barnhart, who Jim always wanted to get to record. And a good thing. So LP.
That one album, what, Fiddler's 3?
Fiddler's 3 it was called, yeah.
Yeah.
My wife designed the album cover, and I did lettering on it.
It has a picture of 3 fiddlers.
Yeah, yeah. Which I was kind of honorary fiddler at that point. I would never claim to be in those guys' league. They had been playing for years and good.
I was just listening to some of your fiddle work the other day, thinking how good it was.
Well, like I say, Jim and I did do a fiddle study then in the early 2000s together. I'm not sure the exact year.
I was listening to a thing you did with Craig Baumberger that I used in a video about Ripson Bridge.
Okay.
And it has some nice fiddling.
Well,
And it's a pretty long song too.
Okay.
It's not the usual
Right.
fiddle tune 1 minute and out.
Yeah, well, Jim's Hoiles albums typically ran. They were the typical length of an LP, but had about 20 songs on them.
Yeah, yeah, they're usually short tunes.
Short.
Yeah.
The other thing, the last album he did was called Different Strokes. That's the most infamous one because we got Alison Krauss to play on that album, who's made a career in country music.
Well, she did a little more than play on it. Her mother co-produced the album.
No, her mother did the artwork.
Yeah, the artwork.
Yeah, I was the producer.
Yeah.
Her mother and father were the original producers, obviously, of her. But what happened?
They didn't cook up the idea
not
in
at
the
all.
first place?
Not at all. I ran into Alison in Champaign. Had a sister-in-law lived up there at that point, and I think I met some guys that knew her at the time, and we kind of got introduced over the years. And then Jim would make an album every couple of years, and it's about time for him to make another album. This is in 1985, and I got to know Alison. I thought this would be interesting to get Jim, who plays a certain style, and Johnny Barnhart, and Alison, who's like this competitive swing fiddler, hot, like jazz fiddler almost.
Oh, yeah.
And who was 14 years old at the time, too.
Yeah, we could talk about how amazing she was, but
anyway, that was the last album.
But even though their styles were so
it's different.
180 degree different,
exactly.
They got along.
Yeah, well, more or less. It wasn't Jim's cup of tea. I mean, he could realize that she was obviously a talented person. His head was more into other kinds of forms of fiddling, I think, and hers too. You know,
so the album really is a Alison track and a Jim track.
Yeah.
An Alison track.
Well, and actually, here's the other story: was Johnny Barnhart, who I thought would be more of a link between styles, didn't show, and we had to go down to Florida, Illinois, to record the album, and we had to have X amount of time to get there. And Johnny didn't show, so that led
Crusade Records.
The Crusade Records in Florida, Illinois.
Yeah.
Record label that Jim discovered early on, and he did all his recording there. So that left things open for me to put a missing track in there once in a while. So kind of got in there too. I didn't fiddle on that at all, but
no, you sure played the heck out of a guitar and a mando.
Oh yeah, I did get mandolin in there.
Yeah.
Her brother Viktor played the upright bass on that.
So Jim Hoiles got to play with one of the world-renowned artists.
Yeah. Who was not world-renowned at that point. She was 14 years old. So
she was getting pretty famous even at 14.
Starting to, yeah. She was whipping everybody at the fiddle contest pretty much. I felt sorry for the old guys at fiddle contest. She was just phenomenal. A virtuoso, basically. So, yeah. So that was Jim's last. And then I did do a fiddle study though when we were talking about earlier with the Illinois Art Council. After that, in the early 2000s, like I say, Jim's health was always fairly robust, but I think the Alzheimer's kind of started getting to him.
But you guys got pretty close while you had that official mentoring process. Yeah. So you were kind of his best pal at that point.
Well, I tell you what, like I say, he had a couple of good pals. One was John, who was the ginseng buddy, and
I can't picture the two of them. I knew John quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, once upon a time they were trappers together, and that's become
no kidding
politically incorrect now, I guess. But, they trapped fur together for a while. There was a market for fur once.
Now, see, I can see John doing that, but Jim, growing up in a fancy house, being a trapper. Wow.
But see, the thing about the fancy house was he always liked the outdoors and nature, and his father would take him on hunting trips and things too. So,
oh, really? They were all into that.
His father didn't live that way, but he appreciated the outdoors and hunting and all that sort of thing.
So he was really a native son of Greenville, and produced some really beautiful art. And those albums, those LPs, you can actually download the Alison Krauss and Jim Hoiles album from my website, Archival Productions. Alison, we think, helped get Jim's record albums into the Library of Congress.
I think so.
And there's an article about that. So anyway, this has been a little feature about a wonderful artist from Greenville. And thanks to Swamp Weiss. I'm Video Bob.
Keep doing what you're doing, Bob.
Visit the Bond County History Museums. Thank you.